Have you heard of No Mow May? The idea is not to cut your lawn and let the flowers grow so that the pollinators have something to eat, particularly the bees. Now, there's also something called No Mow November, but that's something different. Is No Mow May a good idea? Does it work? Does it add benefits for the pollinators? And are there any benefits to the lawn and the gardener? I'll answer all of these questions in the video, and then I'll go on and give you some ideas that are better than No Mow May. Before I get into this, it's worthwhile to look at the history of this. This idea started in the UK, but it didn't start in the way you think. In the UK, you have a lot of small roads, and along the side of the roads are these small areas of planted material. There are a lot of grasses in there, but there are also a lot of wildflowers. Most of these had been mowed, and someone came along with the idea that maybe they should stop mowing these, particularly in May. Let the weeds grow and flower and make seed. Good for pollinators, and then the seeds spread around so you have more next year. That's what No Mow May is all about, and this actually worked fairly well. But if we have a close look at what grows on the side of these roads, you'll see that it's mostly wildflowers with some grasses in there. That's quite different than our lawn. Our lawns are mostly grass that we cut very short, and there's only a few species of weeds that grow in there. The original idea worked great for the sides of these roads, but people have now taken this and applied it to our North American type lawn. So does it work there? So let's look at a few different cases. The first one is the traditional lawn, where people are spreading herbicides to kill the weed. What happens when you let the grass grow long in May? Well, the grass grows, but there are no wildflowers. Lawns that have been treated with herbicides will see no benefit for pollinators when you let it grow long. Another question I wondered about, is May really that important? Like, why pick May? Well, as it turns out, May worked out quite well for what they wanted to do in the UK, and that's where the name came from. No Mow May works in the UK. But it doesn't work in a lot of other places. In California, most of the lawn weeds are flowering in February and early March. By May, they're all done. So it doesn't help pollinators early in the year if you live in California. In the Pacific Northwest, you get a lot of rain and it's relatively cool. And the grass grows like crazy in May. It would be really long if you didn't cut it all month. For bees around here, May is a buffet of pollen, but it's all in the trees. These insects are not spending time on our lawn. Now, earlier in this season, long before dandelions come out, the early bees do have trouble finding food, but if we stop mowing in May, that won't help them at all. So there are many places where May doesn't apply. It simply doesn't work. There was a good study done by Dr. Lerman in Massachusetts, and what they did was they looked at urban-type lawns, and they left some alone, and they mowed others, and they compared the number of pollinators on those lawns. And what they found was that the number of pollinators on lawns did increase during the month of May. But they also found that the number was highest in the second week of May. By the third week, when the grass was growing quite well, the number of pollinators started to drop, and by the end of the month it was even lower. They suggested that the problem is that long grass actually hides the flowers, and so the pollinators don't come to the lawn. Not mowing for a whole month is not helping the pollinators except in that second week period. Now, there was a second study done by Toro and Ribbons in Appleton, Wisconsin, and it also concluded that not mowing your lawn in May was a benefit to pollinators. But that study has now been retracted. When they went back and looked at the actual data and how they did the calculations, they found some irregularities. So the whole study has been taken away. We can't use that as support for No Mow May, although a lot of blogs and news articles never corrected that information. What does not mowing for a month do to the lawn? The lawn grass we use in cooler climates grows best when it's mowed regularly. If we cut a third of the grass off, but we leave the grass longer, so at least 3 inches long, that produces the healthiest grass. When we leave it for a month to get really long, and then we come along and cut it short, that harms the grass. It's now under stress in June and July. And to compensate for that, we have to fertilize more and we have to water more. Otherwise, you end up with a real patchy lawn. On the one hand, you're doing something good for pollinators, but on the other hand, you're doing something bad for the environment, using more fertilizer and more water. What about the weeds that exist in our lawn? Well, they're a special type of wildflower. Things like clover, dandelions, and violet. And don't forget creeping Charlie. All of these plants are low-growing plants that flower low and are able to grow and flower in a lawn that's kept to about 3 to 4 inches tall. If we cut that lawn shorter, then the weeds have trouble growing and flower. If the lawn gets taller, they also have a problem growing. They do best in a lawn that's 3 to 4 inches tall. Not only that, but if we keep the lawn at that height, they will flower for most of the summer. And that provides food for pollinators all summer long. This idea of letting the grass grow for a whole month and then mowing it results in some benefit to the pollinators in the second week. But then we cut it low and kill the weeds, and there's no long-term benefit. It's like opening up a fast food restaurant for a week or two, and then it closes up. Where are the pollinators supposed to go? And this introduces another problem with this whole idea of No Mow May. We do find the pollinators on our lawn, and they do get some pollen, but that doesn't solve our problem. The reason we don't have enough native bees is because of a lack of habitat. They need somewhere to live all year long. Giving them a couple weeks in our lawns isn't really helping them. And there's no scientific evidence that the total number of pollinators is affected by No Mow May, at least not when we're dealing with urban lawns. The problem with campaigns like No Mow May is that they give people a good, warm, fuzzy feeling. People have their lawns and now they feel good. They've done something for the environment. But the actual fact is they've done very little. You might as well mow your lawn. But there are some things you can do. First of all, don't mow your lawn too short. Keep it at least 3 inches tall. Second, don't use herbicides. Leave the weeds grow in your lawn. It won't be a perfect lawn, but it will be better for the environment. But both of those things are not that helpful for the pollinator. We have to do something different. For them to be successful, we have to create a habitat that is there all year long. The best thing you can do is take part of your lawn and turn it into a pollinator garden or a flower garden of any type. That way, ground nesting bees have a place to create their nest. There will be things flowering all summer long. There'll be places for the insects to hide in the fall and over winter. That's a habitat. We have to reduce the lawn. Now, that doesn't mean you have to get rid of your lawn. I'm actually a big fan of keeping lawn. They're good for kids. They're good for dogs. They make the garden look much better. But we can do with less lawn in most cases. And the one area where the lawn is pretty much useless is your front yard. Nobody plays out there. Your dogs don't run around the front yard. It's a small patch of grass that for most people is useless, except that it looks nice and green. If everybody would convert their front lawn into a flower garden, we'd have lots more space for pollinators to live. Now, as you're thinking about creating these gardens, think about the shade garden. And if you want to know my secrets for creating a better shade garden, have a look at this video right here.